Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Kelermorph studio. Welcome to the show. So today's episode is going to be on an Omega level commander. Now, what is an Omega level commander? It is one that is incredibly powerful and a massive threat. And the Omega level commander on this episode is Ghyrson Starn Kelermorph. Ghyrson Starn is a 3/2 Tyranid human that has Ward 2 and it costs 1 blue-red. It has 3 auto stubs. Whenever another source you control deals exactly 1 damage to a permanent or player, Ghyrson Starn Kelermorph deals 2 damage to that permanent or player. So this commander can essentially take very tiny pinging effects that might dish out 1 damage at a time and turn those into massive damage effects, basically tripling those up, going from just a tiny ping to a lightning bolt worth of damage. And believe me, there are a lot of fantastic little pinging effects that you can really take advantage of a commander like this with. So in a group slug style strategy where you are just taking all players down, and in some cases even yourself, you can make things go incredibly quickly with a commander like this. And of course, there are ways to turn those kind of pinging effects that might affect everyone even more into your favor, because keep in mind that this commander itself is the one that is dishing out the damage. So there are certain keywords that we can play around with that we can really take advantage of with the way that this commander is worded. On top of that, of course, it's a very low to the ground commander, so this can go very quickly. And of course, on top of that, again, with something like Ward 2, that's a great way to protect this commander throughout the game. So yeah, this is definitely a very powerful commander, one that is most definitely, in my opinion, an Omega level commander. And yeah, there are some really spicy and interesting things that you can do with a commander like this. And keep in mind that though this commander itself is over $10, the rest of the deck is very budget friendly, with every single card in the deck outside of the commander being less than $1. And with those cards on this episode, I'm going to be taking you through different tactics to show you how this deck works and how we're going to win with it. And of course, if you are interested in this commander and in this deck, make sure you check out that deck list link in the description below. And now with all that said, let's jump into the cards. First up, there's Wayfarer's Bauble, which we can pay 2 to tap and sacrifice to get a basic land into play tapped. Moving on, we're also going to be running some fantastic mana rocks, including Arcane Signet, which can tap for either of our colors, Felwar Stone, which can do so most of the time, and Izzet Signet, which can basically filter one of our mana into both of our colors. And then we've got Talisman of Creativity, which can either tap for a colorless or can tap for one of our 2 colors but deals 1 damage to us. And then we're also running Sky Diamond and Fire Diamond, which each enter the battlefield tapped and tap for one of our 2 colors. Moving on, there's Cold Steel Heart, which when it comes into play, it's going to come into play tap. We choose a color, and then it can tap for that mana. Whereas Liquid Metal Torque and Mind Stone can each just tap for a colorless, but they can also do other things. Liquid Metal Torque has tap, target non-land permanent becomes an artifact in addition to other types until end of turn, and Mind Stone can be sacrificed to draw a card. Finally, we're also going to be running a mana rock that can help us with some card advantage as well with Midnight Clock. It can tap for a blue, or we can pay 2 and a blue to put an hour counter on it, and also at the beginning of each upkeep, we get an hour counter on it. Once it gets that 12th hour counter on it, we're going to shuffle our hand and graveyard into our library and draw 7 cards and exile Midnight Clock. So this can ramp us and also refuel us. But once we've ramped, well, what's next? So next up, let's talk about the Golden Pig of this deck, which is of course the number 1 card out of our 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Basilisk Collar. It's an equipment that costs only 1 mana, and it has equip 2 that says equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink. Now, this is an incredible piece of equipment in this deck because our commander is great with both of those keywords. Again, keep in mind with the way that our commander is worded, whenever one of our sources is dealing 1 damage to something, our commander is going to be dealing an additional 2. So because that damage is coming from our commander itself, when we equip this onto it, well, some interesting things happen. First up, with that Death Touch, again, if our commander is dishing out damage to our opponent's creatures, which happens in a lot of ways that we'll talk about here in a bit, that is going to be an instant KO on those creatures. They're going to get taken out just because, again, with any points of damage from our commander to those creatures, it doesn't matter what their toughness is, they're going to be gone. So even just that part can turn our commander into a one-man wrecking crew, essentially just taking out all of our opponent's creatures in a wide variety of ways. But of course, on top of that, this is going to give our commander lifelink, which is massive. Because again, now whenever our commander is dishing out damage, for every single point of damage that it dishes out, we are going to be gaining life. So it doesn't matter if our commander is dealing out damage to our opponent's creatures, or their faces, or yes, even to us, we are going to be gaining life. Well, I guess I should say we'll gain the life back that our commander is dealing to us. Regardless, yeah, that can be an incredible way to pad our life total, which can come in huge, because again, with a group slug strategy like this one, we are going to be taking ourselves out quickly with our opponents too, but with lifelink, we can get way ahead of our opponents. So yeah, Basilisk Collar helps us out in a lot of ways and is definitely an incredible card with this commander, and definitely, in my opinion, again, the Golden Pig. But of course, we also have other pieces of equipment that can help us out as well. Gorgon's Head and Quietus Spike can help us out in one of those two ways. Gorgon's Head says equipped creature has Death Touch, and Quietus Spike says equipped creature has Death Touch, and whenever equipped creature deals combination to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up. Now, of course, Death Touch is the most important piece of all these, and again, like Basilisk Collar, that can be a great way to just take our opponent's creatures out very easily. But with that second part of Quietus Spike, when we are taking our opponent's creatures out, they're not going to have any blockers, and yeah, we can take out half their life total with this. On the other hand, we do have some cards that can give our commander lifelink as well, with Butcher's Cleaver and Loxodon Warhammer. Butcher's Cleaver is going to give our commander +3/+0, and since our commander is a human, it's going to get lifelink too. And then Loxodon Warhammer gives equipped creature +3/+0, trample, and lifelink. Again, the most important part though is that lifelink. So these can help us gain a ton of life throughout the game. But finally, one other card that can really help us out by giving our commander a specific kind of keyword is Corrupted Conscience. It says enchant creature, you control enchanted creature has infect. So yes, we can steal an opponent's creature with this, but if we put this on our commander, it can make our commander incredibly deadly to our opponents. Because of course, again, keep in mind that infect damage is dealt in the form of poison counters, and it only takes 10 poison counters in total to take a player out. So yeah, our commander can take our opponents out very quickly when this is on. But of course, now that we've talked about adding in some awesome keywords, let's talk about some ways to dish out a lot of damage. So first up, we've got some awesome creatures like Spear Spearer, Blister, Spit, Gremlin, and Thermo Alchemist. Spear Spearer has tap, it deals 1 damage to each player. Now, keep in mind, like I did mention, yeah, there are definitely some effects that are going to affect us as well, and our commander does count those too, so it's going to deal 2 extra damage to us. But again, with a strategy like this one, we are working to take everyone down very, very quickly. And of course, also keep in mind that if our commander does have lifelink, it can help negate some of that damage too, and yeah, make it more favorable for us. But of course, we also have some effects like Blister, Spit, Gremlin that only impact our opponents. We can pay 1 to tap, and it's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. On top of that, whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we untap it. So yeah, basically lightning bolting our opponents a ton throughout the game with this. In a somewhat similar way, there's Thermo Alchemist. It can tap and deal 1 damage to each opponent, and whenever we cast an instant sorcery spell, we untap it. This can output a ridiculous amount of damage throughout the game. Speaking of which, there's Nettle Drone, which can tap to deal 1 damage to each opponent as well, and when we cast a colorless spell, we untap it. So by simply playing a mana rock, we can essentially lightning bolt our opponents again. And then how about Lobber Crew, which can tap and deal 1 damage to each opponent, and whenever we cast a multicolored spell, we untap it. Now that might not come up all that much, but again, the important part is, hey, take out your opponents quicker with something like this. Even just activating this once a turn can make a massive difference. So we're also going to be running Brimstone Trebuchet, which can tap to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and whenever a knight enters the battlefield under our control, we untap it. That's not going to happen, but still, it can dish out a lot of damage for us. But how about some creatures without those tap effects that can still dish out a ton of damage? Let's first start off with Electrostatic Field. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent, which of course gets changed into 3, and yeah, that can add up a lot throughout the game. Speaking of which, there's Firebrand Archer and Kessig Flame Breather, which basically do the exact same thing. Whenever we cast a non-creature spell, they're going to deal 1 damage to each opponent, which of course our commander adds to, and yeah, again, we're going to be casting a lot of non-creature spells with this deck, so we can dish out a lot of pain. But of course, our creatures can help us out as well with Witty Roastmaster. It has whenever another creature enters the battlefield under control, Witty Roastmaster deals 1 damage to each opponent. Or how about with our lands entering as well with Tunneling Geopede and Spitfire Lagak? They each have landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, they're going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. And yeah, 1 damage per land turns into 3, so yeah, basically our lands come with lightning bolts, which of course can be even more deadly when we utilize something, like an Evolving Wilds and basically get double landfall triggers. So a lot of actions in this deck can be very deadly. Speaking of which, there's Spiteful Prankster and Hissing Iguanar, which basically do the exact same thing. Whenever another creature dies, they're going to deal 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. So these also count our opponent's creatures as well, and yeah, I mean, again, that's basically just lightning bolting any player whenever that happens. Or how about Punishment in a different form with Immolation Shaman? It says whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land that isn't a mana ability, Immolation Shaman deals 1 damage to that player. That can really add up throughout the game, especially against specific decks. And speaking of adding up, my goodness, is Mana Barbs incredibly deadly. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, Mana Barbs deals 1 damage to that player. Essentially, everyone gets lightning bolted every single time they are tapping their land. So yeah, this can add up in absolutely no time and take players out. Now keep in mind this does impact us as well, but yeah, a lot of our other effects can take our opponents out and just them, not us. And of course, if our commander does have lifelink, we're going to gain a lot of that life back and then some. And then Burning Earth is somewhat similar. It says whenever a player taps a non-basic land for mana, Burning Earth deals 1 damage to that player. So this one we can actually help mitigate some of our losses by not utilizing a lot of non-basic lands, whereas our opponents might not be so lucky. But of course, we are nowhere near done with pinging things just yet. So next up we've got Goblin Chain Whirler, which says when it enters the battlefield, deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. So this can absolutely wreck our opponents, again dealing 3 damage to all their faces essentially in combination with our commander and potentially taking out a lot of their creatures too. And then Daggercaster is very similar, but it's going to deal damage to our opponents and their creatures they control. Next up, how about End the Festivities, which for just a single red mana, it's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. Which of course gets me into 3 damage, so yeah, basically Lightning Bolt, all the things you don't like for just 1 mana. Moving on, there's like Trickery, which can deal 1 damage to our creature we don't control, and if we overload it, it's going to deal damage to all of them. In a similar way, there's Blazing Volley, which just automatically is going to deal 1 damage to each creature our opponents control. And then Smash Dust gives us an option. We can choose 1, destroy target artifact, destroy target creature with defender, or yeah, deal 1 damage to each creature our opponents control. So depending on the situation, this can help us out in a lot of different ways. Moving on, we've got Gelectrode, which has tap, it deals 1 damage to our creature or player, so this can just pinpoint take certain things out, and of course, whenever we cast an instant sorcery spell, we can untap it. In a somewhat similar way, there's Niv-Mizzet the Fire Mine, which says whenever you draw a card, it's going to deal 1 damage to any target, and of course, we can tap it to draw a card. So now even our card draw can turn deadly against our opponents and their creatures. And speaking of making things deadly for our opponents' creatures, well, there's Chandra's Incinerator, which is going to cost X less to cast for X a total amount of non-combat damage dealt to our opponents this turn, which of course can be a ton with this deck. It's a 6/6 with trample, and it says whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, Chandra's Incinerator deals that much damage to our creature or planeswalker that player controls. So yeah, this can wipe our opponent's creatures out in absolutely no time. Next up, we've got Starstorm, which can deal X damage to each creature, or we can cycle it away, and then Aether Gale, which is going to bounce 6 target non-land permanents back to their owner's hands. Or if we need a big panic button, we've got Neverall's Disc. It's going to enter the battlefield tapped. By paying 1, we can tap to destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. But of course, we're nowhere near done with throwing wrenches into our opponent's plans. So next up, let's talk about Circle of Flame, which is a great way to protect ourselves from our opponent's creatures. It says, whenever a creature with flying attacks you or a planeswalker you control, Circle of Flame deals 1 damage to that creature. So our opponents are going to have to be very careful if they want to actually attack us. If they don't attack us with any flyers, well, their ground creatures are going to get pinged a ton when they come at us. And even if they survive that initial ping, well, they might not survive a follow-up spell that can ping them even further. Or how about creatures just attacking in general? Because Caltrops has something to say about that. Whenever a creature attacks, Caltrops deals 1 damage to it. Which, of course, thanks to our commander, basically gets turned into a lightning bolt on any creature attacking. So, yeah, we're not going to be really aggressive in attacking with this deck, but our opponents might want to. And now we can just take them all out quite quickly with something like this. And if our commander has Death Touch, well, essentially no creatures are going to be able to attack. Now, outside of protecting ourselves with cards like those, well, we can also protect ourselves with cards like Negate. You find the Villain's Lair and Is It Charm, which of course are counter spells. Negate can counter target non-creature spell. You find the Villain's Lair says choose 1 counter target spell or draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. And Is It Charm is somewhat similar. Choose 1 counter target non-creature spell once the player pays 2. It can deal 2 damage to our creature, or we can draw 2 cards then discard 2 cards. But now that we've talked about throwing a lot of wrenches into our opponent's plans, let's talk about how we're going to be getting to all these great cards. First up, Curiosity is incredible in this deck. It says enchant creature. Whenever enchant creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. Keep in mind, this does not specify combat damage, so yeah, essentially any time that our commander is dealing damage to our opponents, which is going to be a lot throughout the game, we're going to be drawing a card, and yeah, if we're pinging all 3 of our opponents with it, that's 3 cards every single time. So we're also going to be running Tandem Lookout, which basically does the exact same thing, but it's a creature with Soul Bond. When it's paired with another creature, each of those creatures has, whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, draw a card. So yeah, a ton of potential card draw with each of these. And of course, we can also utilize some more standard spells like Fact or Fiction, reveal the top 5 cards of your library, and place those cards in 2 piles. You get 1 to your hand and the other into your graveyard. And speaking of more standard spells, well, we also have Behold the Multiverse, which has Scry 2, then Draw 2, and we can foretell for just 1 in a blue. Treasure Cruise, which is going to make us draw 3, and we can delve that cost down all the way just to a single blue mana. And then Pull from Tomorrow is an X spell that is fantastic. Draw X cards and discard a card. Next up, we've got some red spells that can help us out as well. Cathartic Reunion, discard 2 cards to draw 3. Unexpected Windfall, discard 1, draw 2, create 2 treasure tokens, and Big Scorch does the exact same thing. Moving on, we've got some enchantments that can help us out too. Monastery Siege gives us a great option, either Cons or Dragons. Cons says at the beginning of your draw step, basically loot. Or if we choose Dragon, spells our opponents cast that target us or a permanent we control cost 2 more to cast, so some additional protection. Or how about Outpost Siege? When it enters the battlefield, choose Cons or Dragons. We choose Cons at the beginning of our upkeep, we exile top card of our library. Until end of turn, we can play that card, so some nice temporary card advantage. Or with Dragons, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals 1 damage to any target, which of course basically gets made into 3 damage thanks to our commander. But now that we've talked about every single non-land card in this deck, well, let's move on to the lands. And our first land is actually an MDFC land with Spikefield Hazard. It can deal 1 damage to any target. If a permanent dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. Next up, we've got Desert, which can ping attacking creatures. Sunscorched Desert, which can deal damage to a player when it comes into play. And then Shiving Gorge, which can deal damage to all of our opponents by paying 2 in a red and tapping it. Moving on, we've got Command Tower, which can tap for either of our colors. Exotic Orchard, which can do so most of the time. And Ash Barrens, which we can basic land cycle away for 1. Next up, we've got Evolving Wilds and Kelermorph Expanse, both of which we can tap and sacrifice to get a basic land into play tapped, and Maestro's Theater, which we can sacrifice it as well to gain 1 life and get one of our basics into play tapped. Next up, there's Mirror Landscape, which can ramp us. Is it Boilerworks, which is our bounce land, and Temple Epiphany, which is going to have a Scry 1 when it comes into play tapped, and we can tap it for either our colors. And of course, finally, to round out our deck, we're going to be running basic lands with mountains and islands. And now that we've talked about every single card in this deck, let's talk about the price. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, even though our commander is more than $10 itself, this is still a very budget-friendly deck with the rest of the cards in the deck being less than $1, so our estimated cost is just $39.35. And of course, keep in mind that those basic lands are actually counted at 10 cents a piece, so if you already have those basics, well, there's some extra savings for you there. And speaking of potential extra savings, you might be able to save even more on this deck by buying this deck on CG Player and utilizing heavily played and damaged cards, which of course need a home too. Though do keep in mind that this estimated cost does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.